From the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21, verses 12 and 13. Then Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who were selling and buying in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. He said to them, "It is written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer,' but you are making it a den of robbers."
I come here every Monday morning. It has always been like this, at least for as long as I can remember. My parents talk about a time when this room used to be packed with people here to pray and hear the Torah every week. They talk about those days like they were the glory days. If only we could get back to that. Now, the temple is used primarily as a marketplace. I come here every week for the farmer's market to buy eggs and figs and food for my family. And they have the best bread. I've never felt guilty for that because I pray on my own and we still celebrate Passover. So is it really that big of a deal? I used to think not, but that all changed the day Jesus showed up. I don't know I'll ever forget that day. I had just bartered with Samuel down the street to get 2 fresh fish for my kids. That's when I heard the sound. It was so loud, a crash splintering. For a brief moment, I thought God might be tearing open the walls of the temple and climbing inside. I turned around, hands full of fish, to see the money chargers' tables overturned and the doves flapping wildly in their cages. Coins slowly rolled their way across the holiest of holies, and everyone froze. I've never heard silence so loud. Jesus paused and looked around the room. Quietly, he said, "My house used to be called a house of prayer. Prayer for all nations." In the quiet, I felt myself hiding the 2 fish in my hands behind my back, like Adam and Eve hid behind the leaves, wishing the coins in my hands could disappear. And then, as quickly as he arrived, he turned and he left. I can't be sure, but it looked like there might have been a tear running down his cheek. And just for a second, I wondered to myself, maybe, just maybe, that sound really was God tearing open the walls of the temple and climbing inside. Who is he, you ask? I'm not sure. But he's not like me. He's faithful, and he's honest. There was nothing hiding behind his back. Have any of you ever felt that kind of shame? Have any of you ever wanted to hide something from God?
A reading from Matthew chapter 21, verses 23 through 27. When Jesus entered the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him as he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority?" Jesus said to them, "I will ask you one question. If you tell me the answer, then I will also tell you by what authority I do these things. Did the baptism of John come from heaven, or was it of human origin?" And they argued with one another. "If we say, 'From heaven,' he will say to us, 'Why then did you not believe him?' But if we say, 'Of human origin,' we are afraid of the crowd, for they regard John as a prophet." So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And he said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things."
Do you know how many laws are in the Torah? 613. You know how I know that? Because I spent my entire youth memorizing them. Hours upon hours upon hours of repetition. And after I mastered those, I went on to memorize the entire Torah. That's the first 5 books of the Bible, by the way. I spent all those hours sitting at the foot of my teacher so that I could one day teach. That's what faithfulness, sacrifice, and a life of service looks like. At least that's what I've been taught. I've talked to every scribe and priest in the land, and no one knows who taught this Jesus. No one raised him to teach. No one knows if he even passed his Torah comprehension exam. And where does he get his authority? And why are people listening to him? That is a thing that blows me away. His teachings are unorthodox. He's healed on the Sabbath. He's talked to Samaritans. He's completely disregarded our societal lines, befriending women and lepers. Does he even know how many rules he's breaking? I just don't understand. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. I studied for so long, and nothing prepared me for this. And who is he, you ask? Well, he's a radical, a heretic, a rebel, a mystery.
Matthew 26, verses 6 through 13. Now while Jesus was at Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very costly ointment, and she poured it on his head as he sat at the table. But when the disciples saw it, they were angry and said, "Why this waste? For this ointment could have been sold for a large sum and the money given to the poor." But Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why do you trouble the woman? She has performed a good service for me. For you always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. By pouring this ointment on my body, she has prepared me for burial. Truly I tell you, wherever the good news is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in remembrance of her."
It was Wednesday. I heard he was coming to Bethany. People talk about stuff like that. People also talk when you break open a bottle of perfume to anoint someone in a crowd. I learned that the hard way. In a few years, they may forget my name, but I bet they'll remember what I did. I am the woman who anointed Jesus, and it remains one of the moments in my life that I am most proud of. Jesus was at Simon's house. He often went there when he was in the city, and I knew that. We all knew that, because we could see them packed in there. It's hard to miss 12 people packed into a room. So before the sun fell, I grabbed my jar of perfume, the only item of wealth I own, and walked to Simon's. I had begged and saved for years to afford that jar of perfume. It was my backup plan, the safety net when I could no longer work, so I kept it hidden in the cupboard of my house. The whole way to Simon's house, I clutched that jar like a mother holds a baby, terrified that it might slip from my hands too soon, that I might lose the only gift I had to give, accidentally anointing the dirt at my feet instead of the man who had healed so many. It wasn't until I walked through the door and saw Jesus sitting there that I was able to release my grip on that jar. I had made it. I had my gift. And this was the moment. The aroma was unbelievable, sweet like milk and honey, but even stronger than fresh baked bread. I knew where I cracked that jar open, it would be overpowering. It would send people into the street. But I had to do it. People criticized me for wasting that perfume, but they don't know the whole story. They don't know what it meant to be seen and called by name. Jesus pulled me out of the wilderness of my own isolation. They have no idea the healing that Jesus offered me, and they probably could never understand what I would give to do it all over again. I mean, how do you put a price tag on life, on a full and abundant life? I don't need everyone to understand. I just needed him to understand. He gave me the gift of new life. So in return, I gave him the only thing I had. Who is this man, you ask? He was grace embodied and love let loose. And I'll never be the same.
From the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 26, verses 14 through 16. Then one of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I betray him to you?" They paid him 30 pieces of silver, and from that moment he began to look for an opportunity to betray him.
Could he have really been the Messiah, the Son of God? Could he really be the one that God sent to redeem the world? Really? There were days I was convinced he was, like the day he fed the 5,000 people. I still can't figure out how he did it, but I was there, and people ate their fill. Or the night he told Peter to walk to him on water. I could never begin to tell you how that happened, but I was there. It felt real. But there are other days I wasn't so sure, like the day he sent us out 2 by 2 to heal the people. Did he really expect us to be able to do what he did? Or the days that he rebuked the Pharisees? Could the Son of God really be that hard on people, especially the leaders of the law? I wanted to believe that he was the Messiah. I really did. I wanted to give everything I had, but something deep within me wasn't settled. I was beginning to lose sleep over it, and the Pharisees began to whisper in my ear. What if he wasn't all he said he was? What if everything I saw could be explained? What if I had risked my life only to find out he was another great teacher among many? It was that unsettled voice within me that told me to do it. That small voice was more powerful than my will, my thoughts, my faith. It ruled me, and I followed it. Most people say I betrayed him for the money, but that would be too simple. I handed him over because I couldn't know who he was for certain. There is no black or white, no 100% proof when it comes to God. Doubt is an untamed wilderness of the mind, and that shade of gray ate at me. Who was that man, you ask? If you would have asked me last week, I would have told you, I'm not entirely sure. Ask me on Sunday, and my answer will have changed.
I will be reading from Matthew chapter 26, verses 36 through 47. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over and pray." He took with him Peter and 2 sons of Zebedee, and he began to be grieved and agitated. Then he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me." And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not what I want, but what you want." Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So you could not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray, that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again he went away for the 2nd time and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." Again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the 3rd time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd, with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people.
It all happened so fast. It was late, later than I had realized, and sleep was clinging to me like a fog I couldn't shake. I heard the crowd arrive in my dreams. At first, I thought it was a crowd of people wanting Jesus to heal them. I thought selfishly to myself for just a moment, how in the world did they find us here? That's when I started to wake up. I realized the crowd didn't sound right. It wasn't people praising Jesus or begging for mercy. It was too quiet, far too quiet for that. And in the quiet, I could hear the clink of swords in sheaths. I frantically pulled myself from sleep, shaking awake my brothers and trying to stand up quickly. I saw Judas at the front of the crowd. What is he doing here? I thought. Maybe things will be okay after all, I thought. But I was wrong. In a split second, my whole world fell apart around me. I went from knowing my way, knowing my purpose, knowing my plans, to standing in the wilderness alone. It happened as quickly as a summer thunderstorm, and as slowly as the change in seasons. The crowd, with clubs and swords, were taking Jesus. They were taking him away, and he was not fighting it. Maybe if I had stayed awake like he had asked, then this wouldn't have happened. Maybe if we had left Jerusalem and gone back to Bethany, this wouldn't have happened. What am I supposed to tell my family? The man I have seen heal the sick and walk on water has been arrested, and the angels didn't stop it. Who is this man, you ask? He's not a criminal, that's for sure. It all happened so fast.